inwardly focused churches usually practice trying to connect those who have been disconnected. So every church I've ever gone to, when I first get there, every laity has told me this: you need to get back to people we've already lost. Every church I've ever gone to, that's the first thing they tell me. You got to get back to people we've already lost, Pastor. If we could just go visit all the people on the inactive list. Well, you want to have a bad day, start that phone list. And if you're still focused on membership versus discipleship, you're focused in the wrong place. Growing churches today, missional churches today, understand the scorecard that you now need to keep isn't about how many members you have. It's about how many disciples are you making. The end product for the church isn't, oh, I'm a member. It's, I am a follower of Jesus. And that's a shift, and I get that, because most of us, including me, grew up in a time when we actually said the end product was church membership. And there's a workbook that goes with this. You can get all this online at Amazon or Abington. The first third of the book is about how to teach your congregation 4 steps. So if you're a leader from your church going, well, how do I change the culture at my church? Because that's much of what we're having to do. We are having to recraft the culture of the church. And the first third, this is in 3 sections. The first third is about how do I equip my church to find its story and equip my folks to find their story. Why? What was the schedule again? We're going to start with get their name. It's going to go to starter conference that leads to a moment where you got to tell your story. Then it leads to, would you like to come with me? Say it. With me back to the preaching house. Most of our folks, when they get to the moment, they will sell the church every time because they have not told their story in a generation. And they don't even know what that is. Doesn't mean they don't have one, and we just haven't practiced it. And so the first third of the book talks about how do you get the story back into our folks, into yourself. And we use an illustration of school, elementary, middle school, and it's just an illustration of how to do it. It doesn't mean being at school. The middle third of the book, by the way, if we get there or don't get there today, is about, well, how do I actually connect with people out here in the real world without being weird? The last third of the book is, if you're going to go to all that work, dear friends, and then somebody shows up to your church on Sunday, and it isn't very good, you just wasted all that time. So the back third is about, are you ready for a guest? And quite frankly, friends, as much as we've talked about this in Missouri, it is still disappointing to me how often I arrive at a church and they're no more ready for a guest than they were 20 years ago. Because I really still believe what hinders most lay people and even a lot of clergy from inviting people to their churches, they're not confident that somebody would have a good experience when they got there. And you want to mess up a weekday relationship at work or school or at play, that is, invite a friend to church, then they have a bad experience and then talk to them on Monday. Tell me how that works out. It actually changes a relationship. And so what most lay people learn to do is not invite anybody. I'm not taking the risk. Because the Sunday morning experience, they didn't have confidence in the Sunday morning experience. And by the way, I don't have much confidence in the Sunday morning experience in most of our churches. I just don't, for new people. It's fine if you are already connected, and that's already your home. We're a generational church. And that's your home, it's fine. But if you're brand new, it's a rare church that's ready for brand new people who are not generationally Methodists. So let's just run a little test here and test you all. I think you'll probably pass the test. How many of you grew up, were born in the United Methodist Church or one of the versions of the United Methodist Church? Keep that in here. So how many of you were born or raised in some other tribe, Presbyterians or Baptists or Catholic or something else, but you were born and raised up in that tribe? Hands up. What does that tell us? We're tribal. That's why I call us a tribe. We're generational. And if I went on down my experiment, I often asked, so how did you get to that church? And most of us would say, well, I didn't get there. My grandmother and mother carried me in. Right? By the way, and my mother was carried in by her mother, and her mother was carried in by her mother, and her mother was carried in by her mother. We're very much generational. And so we have very little experience, and we spend a lot of time in meetings like this talking about those people out there. And we think we know who they are and what they need, and we've never been one of them. We all think we know what the guests need. You've never been a guest. You always were. It's very different when you never were and you walk into our deal. It just is. It doesn't mean you're bad. It just means we don't have any experience. I didn't have experience doing it. I thought I knew. I mean, I've planted 2 churches. I've transformed a rather large church. I've built 3 of the best greeter systems in the state of Missouri in my 37 years. But what I didn't understand until I took this job was I didn't really teach my churches how to actually connect. Do you need greeting? Yeah, a lot of you could use greeting. But if you're going to be guest ready, you have to learn how to actually connect people so that they can belong. How many of your churches already have service projects? You do. I mean, you have good stuff. You collect cans, you collect shoes, you collect backpacks, you do there's a laundry, right? I bet if you stopped at your table now and made a laundry list of all the things you collect, put together, and give away, Easter baskets, Christmas baskets, turkey. I mean, one of the big things at Church of Shepherd was a big turkey thing for basket. Are you with me? It would be, United Methodists have a laundry list, and we love doing this because we're trained in the Wesleyan way of doing good works. Yes? Doing good deeds. What we rarely do, though, is add the good word to it. First, we normally do all this stuff and don't get to know anybody. We don't even talk to the people. In fact, we have this wonderful excuse that, well, we can't go see the people we're handing the sack of grocery to because that would be against the rules. You know, that there's a privacy thing there, and you can't know that. Joachim and Ann used to tell me that in St. Charles County. Well, you can't know who the people are. Well, you know who the people are. We decided we weren't going to give them any more food unless we had a chance to go meet the people. Guess what? They came our way pretty quick. Well, I guess you could meet some of the people. So how do you meet the people? Step 1 is look at the things that your church is already doing. We'll stop here, kind of take a break, and you make a list of the service things your church already does. And ask this question. Could you pick 2 or 3 of them and take another step? Just pick a couple of them to take a step. What do I mean by the step? Anybody know what I mean by the step by now? How could I actually meet the people and just start a conversation with them? So repeat that question to me. What can I do to be helpful? By the way, that is the evangelism question in step 1 every time. So if I had Boy Scouts in my church, I'd want to get all the names from the Boy Scouts. I'd want to get prayer partners for the Boy Scouts. I'd want the prayer partners to call each parent to say, hey, I'm your son's prayer partner at church. Man, we're just really glad they're in the Boy Scouts at our church. And then just so you know, I'm going to send a note to your son. You got to do that so people don't think you're weird and doing odd things. And, and then you need to finish that conversation with that parent by saying, is there anything else I could do to be helpful? And then next month, what are you going to do? You're going to call the Boy Scout. You go see the Boy Scout. You help the Boy Scout. See, we have Boy Scouts, but we don't do anything from the church side to build a relationship with the Scout. We just think they should show up on Scout Day and somehow get Jesus. That's an example of taking a good deed or a good thing we're already doing and asking, could our church take a step? Now, it could be the preschool, it could be it could be anything, some sort of a step that gets your church beyond just doing stuff to actually building relationships. Now, don't pick them all because you can't manage it. Which 2 things could we take a step with? And teach people to start asking that question, what else could we do to be helpful? It's adding the good word. That is elementary school faith sharing. Do I need you to invite them to church? No. In fact, don't invite people to church. Quit it. Sounds weird, doesn't it? Because you're trained like I was trained. The minute you get a hold of that new name is, hey, would you like to come to my church? We'd like to see you Sunday. And you'll just turn them right off. What you need to ask them, is there anything else we could do to be helpful? Now, friends, are you going to be able to answer that question every time they give you something? Probably not. But you could some of it. Don't ask it if you're not willing to try. A lot of times you can help, and you got to say, well, we can't do that. But we could do this, or I could connect you to somebody that could. People need to see the church as helpful, not a church that's trying to get people to come so that you can have more people write checks to save your budget. I mean, if you're looking, you need more people to fill your pews to write checks to save your budget, why don't you just close now? Get the pain over with, because that doesn't work. So think of the things you can do at your church, or the events, or the things that are already running through your building that you could say, well, we have this every week in our building, and we get 30. Most people have no clue how many different kinds of people walk through the building, but we don't have a relationship with them. So pick a couple. So step one in elementary evangelism is draw up a laundry list of everything you're doing, or every event that you do, or from Vacation Bible School to Trunk or Treat to ice cream social to turning butter or whatever it is you do, and ask the question, which two of these or three could we take a step with? One of the things that we did at Schweitzer was ask them to think about in their Tuesday, Thursday, if that's exactly right, but whenever they're doing their give away their groceries, would they ask their clients, would you like to have a prayer? And I got to tell you, they did not think that was a good idea. I got every excuse there was. Well, we give away commodities, government commodities. They won't let us pray for the people. Really? Has the government been by recently to check on you? I mean, it's what I'm thinking. They gave me, it would clog up the line. Well, we have a lot of folks that would tell us that, because we only open from here to here. And, it would just mess up the, Methodists. We're running people through to get their groceries. And then somebody said, well, they wouldn't want it anyway, Really? So I said, why don't you just try it for me? Just ask them as they get their grocery sack, would you like to have a prayer? And you could step them out of the line and just have a short prayer with them. And so, by the way, they tried that. And they were stunned. Again, I'll have the numbers all wrong, but a significant group of the folks who were coming through the line, not only did they say, yes, I'd like to have a prayer, the biggest thing the church stumbled around with was, we'd have to have prayer people. By the way, here's what it led them to do, to stand up on Sunday and ask, is there any prayer partners that could come over when we're doing the giving away and pray for people? By the way, they had so many people step out of line, they finally decided we ought to give a little privacy, and they built a prayer room. And then the prayer room led, we got a prayer room. When they started asking, what's that question? What else could we do to be helpful? They discovered all kinds of things, of course, that they need to be, and they even put in a room for client services, and they started doing other things, which led us to going, I wonder what would happen if we started a worship service in here for folks who maybe don't feel very comfortable in our nice, richy congregation, UMC, upper middle class, and they feel better over here in this warehouse. And the church raised $500,000, by the way, to remodel the warehouse so it looked like quality. Just because you're challenged economically doesn't mean you ought not to get quality when you arrive at church. And they would walk into the warehouse, and they've got a quality. It's called the Church at the Center. By the way, it's the Mission Center. And the Church at the Center, which is Schweitzer Church, but it's Church at the Center, meets now on Sunday evenings. They serve a meal, and they get 80 to 150 people every Sunday night for worship. They've now got a pastor doing that. They get an entire ministry around this, and most of these folks live within a mile of the church. 3 years ago, none of that was going on. It all started by asking, would you like to have a prayer?